Hello out there in Nala Land. We commence a new series of our Honorable Mention series. Sorry for that repetition. And today's class, as always, is Leila Nishmas Rachaleh Bas Rav Chaim Tzvi Hallel Shalom. We thank all the Nala people who have brought Torah across the world throughout cyberspace. Now, let me just give you a little bit of an introduction on what we intend to accomplish in this new segment we're going to present. So in the last series, we just really just touched on Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick. And so let me delineate what we're going to cover in the next series of classes. We're going to come back to Bikur Cholim, visiting the sick, along with comforting the mourners. We'll do that several classes down the road. And what we want to do is first go within the rubric of discussion of what are the components of chesed. Chesed is a word which almost defies translation, and we're not going to dwell on this, but normally we translate as loving kindness, or to care, but it's quite different than the general concept of this term. Fact of the matter is, society at large, a secular society, cannot legislate laws that are positive. A secular government can legislate you may not speed, or kill, or commit grand larceny, but it cannot legislate to act in a conjointal sense of we on behalf of the community. So we're going to look at where we learn out the idea of chesed and what it's going to compel us to do. We're going to, in today's class, we're going to look at the components and practical ramifications of loving your neighbor. In subsequent classes, we will shatter the mindset that chesed is merely a commendable thing to engage in, but rather it's a halachic obligation, and it's not that you have a choice. If you do not fulfill the mitzvah of kindness, then you will not be punished, because it's not a negative commandment, but you will have violated a commitment from the Torah, an obligation from the Torah. We will then visit with a deeper focus on the mitzvah of visiting the sick and comforting mourners, and finally, and this is a first, because I always shy away from this, we're going to actually look into philosophical components, the underpinnings of this mitzvah. Enough introduction said, let's get started. My source material for today's talk is the very fine book published many years ago by Rabbi Zelig Pliskin, Love Your Neighbor. The book is not about loving your neighbor. The book is about concepts we derive from the weekly Torah portion, but of course he goes to great length when he gets to the mitzvah of love your neighbor, which is not the subtitle, the very essence of the book. Okay, so it's a pasuk in Parshas Kedoshim. It's a very well-known pasuk. It's the most famous pasuk in the entire Torah. We've said that already. And we've already learned how the Rambam learns. The Rambam learns that it means caring about someone's monetary possessions. If you're careful about your own possessions, and you don't want to waste your own money, you don't want to ring up your own telephone bill or electric bill, and you're large on someone else's house, then you have violated, you may have violated stealing, but you certainly have violated loving your neighbor. According to the Rambam, loving your neighbor as you love yourself, because you're more careful with your own possessions than you are with someone else's possessions. Let's continue. So, the mitzvah is, first of all, we have to praise others. And here's a good word of caution. Praise others, build up someone's ego, stroke their ego. That would certainly be the mitzvah of loving your neighbor as you love yourself, but a word of caution. As the Chafetz Chaim talks about, you may not praise someone excessively in public, because that may trigger someone to belittle what you're saying. They're not so good. So you don't want to do that. That could be avak lashon hara. You don't want to praise someone in the presence of someone who dislikes him. That will for sure catalyze him to say something negative. And also, not in the presence of a group. Too much excessive praise will likely generate negative comments, which we don't want to do. Okay, so first thing we're saying is you have to praise other people and not do anything at yourself that will humiliate someone else. There's a story about Rav Nachum Zev Ziv, who was a very dynamic speaker, and he was scheduled to speak at a certain occasion after another great scholar spoke who was not a very talented speaker. And Rabbi Zev Ziv refused to speak. He later explained to his daughter, if I would have gotten up to speak after this first speaker who was not such a successful speaker, I would have perhaps elevated my own ego at the expense of someone else, and therefore refused to speak. Now, this commandment of loving your fellow man can be filled at all times, every single second of the day. Every second you can fulfill this mitzvah. Any favor you do for someone else, which is a kind favor, is a fulfillment of the commandment. But you can also fulfill this commandment through thought. If you learn someone has a baby and you're happy for them, you fulfill the mitzvah. If someone, lo aleinu, suffered a tragedy, and you feel their pain, you have fulfilled the mitzvah of loving your neighbor the way you love yourself. And therefore, since you can fulfill the mitzvah through thought, it is possible to amass thousands and thousands and thousands of fulfillment of this mitzvah, each and every day. Thousands of times. In the course of a day, you can ring up in your mitzvah bank account. Now, the difficulty lies in that people, by nature, are jealous of other people. And it's hard to be grateful and to be happy when when their fortune soars. And it's hard to feel sad when someone, when their situation plummets.